Yeah, well, first of all, I have to say how jealous I am because, whenever I make a Jimmy Dore video and as it's uploading, I always say to myself, this is luck. But then something happens and he says something crazy. It's been constant, ever since spending way too much time focusing on it.
Yeah, and he's been going crazy in slow motion for like what, 2 to 3 years now.
Yeah, I was a paying member of his podcast. I mean, going back to 2013, and I went through my own sort of evolution and kind of watching, particularly during the 2016 primary, watching him evolve from an ardent Bernie supporter, to being Bernie or bust, which is not great, to before the election where he was like, I think we should try and basically let Donald Trump become president, and then after the election, just forgetting all of that ever happened.
Yeah, and, all those accelerationist takes that you hear people quote, and it almost seems like they're joking. Like, come on, there can't actually be people out there who think that like by electing Donald Trump will accelerate towards the revolution faster. But there were a few, and like Jimmy Dore legitimately is one. I'm not sure like how consistent he stays intellectually in his addled brain, but like he was one. It is what he said.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, he kind of, I mean, it's what's irritating is that because he has his show, he doesn't take phone calls. So nobody can really challenge what he says. So, you can make your YouTube channel like I do, and let me show you what he's saying and why it's crazy, or just get lost in the sea of comments on his YouTube channel. I mean, there doesn't seem to be a really good way to like kind of challenge him because he doesn't want to be challenged.
Yeah, I want to get to that in a second. Before I do, though, just to tell everyone, in case you're wondering what the fuck is happening, I'm joined here by Kid Show Business, my friend and comrade, fellow Majority Report, Team BS / other shows listener, who is he's quite modest about his credentials in Jimmy Doreology, but he's actually quite learned and skilled, and I'm very pleased to have him here today. Thanks for coming, Kid Show Business.
Thank you, Jeff. I prefer to refer to myself as a self-appointed dumb-dumbologist. So.
Dumb-dumbologist. Sorry, it's a brand new field, everyone. So we're still nailing down the academic terminology. In terms of it's a hard thing to get a hold of Jimmy. It's not just that he doesn't like take calls or whatever, because a lot of people don't take calls. But what is it just me or he sits in the paywall like a shitload of his stuff? Even his announcement that he's leaving TYT this weekend is paywalled, right?
Yeah, it's not put out. What Nitsky and I do, who's like the other main Jimmy Dore watcher, is he posts his sort of live streams. Well, what he does, he records them with a phone or something. But what I do when I need to get something from the live stream is I'll get, he posts them Sunday night and like that. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff that he puts behind the paywall that's where honestly that and aggressive progressives is where he says the craziest stuff. And that's really, the places where you cast the fishing net that catches the most fish. Really.
Because I do kind of feel as though if you go through the comment threads on this stuff, a lot of times you'll see like, you don't listen to his show or where can I find this or whatever. And it's not so much that they have a point as in there is at least a little bit of something there. Because a lot of times it can be difficult to track down Jimmy saying this recent thing that's really incredibly problematic or that recent thing that's incredibly dangerous or stupid, because it's probably like behind a paywall. He puts everything behind a paywall, which I don't want to begrudge the guy. Like, we all want to make a living, I guess, but I don't know, at a certain point, like, aren't you a public figure whose content is for public consumption and not just your own cultish following? I don't know, it just seems to me a little bit odd.
Yeah, I mean, the stuff that's on the paywall seem to be things that are like, it's like almost like his rough draft of the videos that he's going to be making. And so a lot of it, I mean, it's a function of when stories happen that he wants to talk about. But usually it's like if it'll either be practiced on aggressive progressives if it happened early in the week, or practiced on the live stream if it happened late in the week, ultimately winds up, sort of, through the sausage maker into the final videos that he puts on his channel.
Yeah, and for anyone out there who wants to rag on me or my guests for saying or ah or or like a lot, or Sam Cedar for doing it, if you watch a Jimmy Dore video, they're even less polished. But broadly speaking, like I really want to go through like three main big beefs that I have with Jimmy, and the first one's pretty simple, and it's a little bit logic nerdy, kid show business, but it's that like Jimmy doesn't seem to give a shit about what's true. Can you speak a little bit about how you feel about that, how you see that? Do you think Jimmy gives a shit about what's true, or do you think he just looks for stories that already match his preconceived notions?
No, I absolutely think that he just he finds any little story, regardless of how credible or dubious the source is, that confirms his bias, and let's go with that. I mean, I was a paying member of Jimmy Dore's podcast back in 2013, and there was a couple moments. One moment in particular that really happened in 2014 was the Michael Brown shooting. Jimmy, on his podcast that week, he opened by saying, it was reported that Michael Brown paid for the cigarellos leaving the store, right? And as I was listening to that, I'm like, wow, that would be huge if true. But then I went and looked it up, and the only source I could find that would corroborate that was like, Deathlord's blogspot.com or something like that. And so, and then he never issued a correction, and he just doubled down after that. And that has been his consistent play. When you look at like Seth Rich stuff, to this day, he'll say like, people are smearing me when they say that I pushed Seth Rich stuff, which is obviously.
He was just asking questions, right? Like, or that stupid, Brooks talks about this all the time, and I'll jump on the bandwagon because I actually do think Lula of Brazil is a pretty important figure in the world, and like has no business being in jail. And to see Jimmy's fucking sidekick just blurt out like, "Oh, cool, like Lava Jato."
I want a Lava Jato t-shirt.
Yeah, I get it that you made a mistake, okay, Ron. And I get that you look stupid, and we're all making fun of you for it. And like, you wish you could take it back, and you can't. I know how that feels. But you know what you could do? You could say, "Damn, I messed up, fam," or whatever, or even something. They don't say anything. They never say anything. They have these bird brain predictions about how things are going to go, the way things are. And when they don't pan out, they just move on to the next thing. It's actually very right wing in a way.
Yeah, I mean, if they never issue corrections, they either don't respond or they double down. And I mean, if he would just say, "Hey, I got this one wrong, and here's why it's right," then I probably wouldn't have for my channel, basically.
I mean, and then, like I said, we're all gonna get things wrong at sometimes. There's been some things that I've gotten wrong on my podcast, small things that haven't needed revisiting. And there's been some other things just where I've thought that my phrasing was a little bit ambiguous when it shouldn't have been, or whatever. It's never going to be good enough, right, at a certain point for the creator. But, that doesn't give you an excuse not to, like, give a shit anymore. And I'm not a journalist or even like a serious academic of any kind, but I do really care about getting it right. I thought as much as the average like internet podcast host needs to, and yet like I feel like my commitment towards the fidelity of truth is so much greater than Jimmy Dore's that it's actually like pretty sad for him. And it's pretty sad that TYT has put up with him for so long and allowed him to leave on his own terms. I think that I'm glad he's gone, but
yeah, I think that him leaving is a long-term positive for TYT. I mean, just looking at point.
I do, and I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I do want to say I think probably short term it is. I would bet like yes, they actually will take a hit. They will take a hit, and it will hurt, it will suck. But if they can hold on, and they should, then yes, it will absolutely be for them in the long run.
Yeah, the flip side, well, yeah, what I say about that is, I was really surprised that he got, or that he left, because I mean, I had reached a point after the Francesca DMs where, sent a bunch of, text messages to Francesca as a TYT correspondent that were really abusive. They're on Twitter. You can find them. That, oh, this is going to be the thing. This is going to be something that TYT cans him, and then it didn't happen, and he put out a statement, and he's still there. And I had reached a point where I was like, I don't think, when I saw the rumor yesterday that he had a big announcement, like, I don't think he's, it's something else.
I mean, I took that incident and a couple other things that he's been like these little jabs and act outs that he does online as him basically baiting TYT into firing him, or asking him to go, because if they do that, he can put on his like martyrdom shirt, and all of a sudden like his independent funding launch is that much more successful and gets that many more eyeballs. And when the Francesca stuff was happening, I was a little torn between whether it was that or whether it was the second reason, largely speaking, that I really can't fucking stand this TA squad. And that is the fact that politics isn't really about other people for him. It's not about the distribution of resources for people who don't have. It's not about tax rates. It's not even really about war or Tulsi or anything that he talks about. It's about Jimmy, what Jimmy feels, and whether you'll come on his show to argue with him, right? All Jimmy cares about is Jimmy.
Bernie won't come on my show.
Every time I talk to Bernie's press secretary, Josh says, I have to look at the schedule. So it's insulting to even talk to them right now. He goes, I have to look at the schedule. He's doing every neoliberal show in the world.
It is always a pleasure to welcome to this program the senator from Vermont, Bernie Sanders. Bernie, welcome to the program.
Great to be with you, Sam.
You could see it with the way he talked about Bernie, the way he talked to Francesca, or the way he did our boy Sam back in the day, which is where this like all fucking started for us, kind of, right?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, he, I put up a video last night where Ben and Steve on an old school episode kind of go in and they talk about Jim. And Steve says that, Jimmy's a really emotional guy, and he kind of, it seems to me, kind of lets his temper get the best of him a lot. I mean, one of the things that those DMs kind of revealed to me was that, okay, gosh, this firebrand teeming with rage on camera is probably the same off camera.
Yes, he's not really playing a character. He is that guy, and he's pretty nasty. Generally speaking, like I try to talk about politics more than like personality on the show, but at a certain level, like the human part of me just wants to scream out, because I can recognize, just a shitty human being when I see one. Jimmy Dore is like not a good person. He's mean and paranoid and not very bright. He's a lot like Cliff Schecter, who's also not a very good person. But we're not here to talk about him. We're here to talk about Jimmy. The third, like largely speaking, reason that I don't really like Jimmy, other than like he doesn't seem to care about what's true and politics is just about personal agreement to him, is that I want to be careful here, because I don't want to say more than I'm sure of. But his audience is becoming politically heterodox, we'll say, right? I think there are some socialists and some lefties in his audience for sure, and some greenies and that kind of thing. I also think there's another kind of person he's developing in his audience. I don't know if you've noticed or if you've come across these people, and I have no idea or no way of knowing how many of them are, but I mean, there's no real nice way to say it. They're either right wingers or they're crypto right wingers, right? Like
that is absolutely right. I mean, all you have to do is take a look at the comments section under, particularly any video that is critical of the Trump administration. The comments, there was a period a couple weeks ago where he put out like 3 anti-Trump videos, or 4 videos, and the comments were all like, Jimmy, normally I like your show, but you're wrong on this. We have to build the war. AOC is terrible. And he
God.
to the point where he went in and pinned a comment to his video that was like, hey, basically like, trying to pretend like, okay, I know I have all these Trump supporters, so I'm going to speak to them and try and bring them over. Of course, what are the likelihood that that's going to work? But also, his super chats on his live streams seem to be half right wingers. My theory about why he appeals to Trump supporters and certain parts of the left is that there seems to be a lot of appetite for any content that wants to dunk on Hillary Clinton for ad nauseum, MSNBC.
Yes.
And so that appeals to Trump supporters, lock her up. It also appeals to, people that are still hold a grudge over 2016 and Bernie. And
they took it away, but I remember, and I'm not watching a ton of Young Turks videos or anything, but the promos for the network, for Aggressive Progressives, his show behind the paywall on the TYT network, it was it literally had like a MAGA chud quote, like Jimmy is awesome or something like that, and you could tell just from like the username. I don't remember what it was. It was something like extremely right wing with like an American flag Abby. Also, there's no ambiguity about like where this guy's coming from, and he's a huge Jimmy fan, right? I got no way of knowing how many of those people there are, but and I don't think Jimmy's necessarily on the level of like Michael Tracy is, whose fan base really is probably like 70% right wing. But this is a career move, right? Like this is a turn in the road, and I feel like maybe that's sort of the lane that he's headed down. Maybe he won't be quite as crypto Nazi friendly as some of those figures, but that's where his bread is buttered, in LA is an expensive town, I guess.
But what I'm not sure of about Jimmy is how much of it is a plan. And because guys like Michael Tracy and some of the other ones that are doing that shtick, when Jimmy Dore says, hey, I'm a dumb guy, I'm inclined to believe him. I'll take his word.
No, me too. That's a good fucking point.
So it doesn't seem like there's a plan like, okay, now I'm going to make this pivot here. I just think that it's pure instinct, it seems. And he's just, although I do think that like his audience does guide him quite a bit, because the sense that I get is that whenever he strays too far from whatever, if you imagine like a dial that you turn, that's like, okay, I'm Jimmy Dore. If I turn my dial and pointed to this signal, 4.3, whatever it is, I notice that a shit ton of Patreon dollars come. But if I turn it a little bit off and I start criticizing Trump, I get a lot of bad feedback. So let's put that dial back and make another Chris Hayes dumb video.
And you don't need to be, particularly sensitive to grasp that sort of intuitive, mechanism. And I think, on the other hand, like giving him some credit, I actually do think like to be a comedian or a performer or a host of any kind, like you do need to have some sort of like interpersonal intuition. So like, just because I think Jimmy's kind of a nasty, socially maladjusted, paranoid psychopath, like doesn't mean that I don't think that he can't read a room and can't read people pretty well. And just because like he's not very smart and doesn't have a plan, I agree. I think he's doing a lot of this instinctually in a way, and we shouldn't knock instinct necessarily in that, at least in terms of pure utility. What he's doing is disgusting. But it's going to work for him, I think, or not. What do you think? Do you think he's going to come out of this in a few years more successful, looking back on this day as like a time when he made a good decision, or not?
Well, I'll say that I think that the flip side of him, TYT benefiting from him leaving, is that I think that he now has a card that he can play as a function of leaving TYT. I mean, a lot of his audience hates TYT, probably because of
Hillary shills,
Hillary shills, neoliberal, all that stuff. But I mean, he now I mean, I would be shocked if Joe Rogan or Dave Rubin or both have not contacted him and said, "Hey, come on our show and start talking trash about TYT." Now, whether he'll do that or not, I would be surprised. Said, unloaded on TYT.
Yeah,
but
just like immediately the next day. That would be crazy. Yeah, can we talk a little bit about the everyone other than Jimmy right now? I guess like how TYT is reacting to this. So, if people don't know, Jank's been full of grace and love over this. Jimmy has mostly been publicly polite and cordial over this. I've heard he said some pretty nasty things yesterday, and even maybe the day before about this. His wife, Steph Zimmerano, says that Jimmy wants to focus more on touring, which I do believe. I do believe he probably will spend more time touring, and that he wants more time to do that and host the show, the Jimmy Dore Show, and not have to worry so much about TYT, aggressive progressives, and all of it. I believe, and they're all being really nice to each other right now, and nobody seems to be comfortable bad mouthing anyone else, including Jank, who thanks Jimmy for all his time and work, despite disagreeing with him on several occasions, putting it mildly. But my question to you is, how long do you think it's going to last? 2 days, 2 weeks, 2 months? Surely not 2 years, right?
You mean the friendliness of it?
Yeah. How long do you think the kumbaya is gonna last? How many choruses they got of that to sing before they start scratching each other in the eye?
I don't think it'll last very long at all. I mean, it was kind of out of character, I think, for because
Yes.
I mean, nobody. I don't think anybody who has not seen the live stream. I'd be surprised if they've seen his. But it was very amicable, and it sounded like and he even started to tear up at the end of it. But yeah, so there's just been this festering, what I've seen anyway, as a watcher. There's been a lot of comments. Like a year ago, there's a video on my channel that from one of the aggressive progressive where he really just like, everybody works at the goddamn Young Turks, and that's how he ended the show. And so, and if you look at, I mean, his the Jimmy Dore YouTube channel, if you look at his liked videos, there's a lot of like little satellite channels. Progressive Voice calls them the Jimmy Dore Defense League channels, that they just put out videos that are just fundamental. And so the Jimmy Dore channel will like a lot of those videos, like criticizes Sam's. There's a lot of that type of stuff. So it's clear there's a lot of animosity that's to come out.
That's the first thing one of his stands told me on my tweet about this. The first thing they brought up, hey man, I get that you want to be cool with the majority report because they're who you like. And I'm like no one had mentioned Sam. I didn't mention Sam. Nobody mentioned the majority report. I wasn't thinking about Sam. This is my fucking beef. Sam can step off, okay? This is my original. It's real, like I told you in private before we started. Jimmy was like my original political nemesis. It was never Cliff. It was always Jimmy. And the reason it was, and I've told Michael this to his face on his show, and to his face when I met him in Brooklyn, Jimmy Dore became such a fucking idiot all the time, and it made me so mad that I thought, no matter what I did, there's no way I could be worse. There's no way I could be like dumber than him, right? Like this. And so, like, why? What am I waiting for? Like, to start your own stupid little podcast. So here we are, right? So thank you, Jimmy. You did do that one good thing for the world, I suppose. I don't know really what else to add to this except to talk a little bit about some of the bills of particular, right? Because like Jimmy, yes, he says bad, crazy things, and his politics are actually kind of shitty and undeveloped a lot of times. But some of his greatest hits, we've touched on some of them. I don't know if you have any. I don't want to let the guy forget that he's a 9/11. Still gets prickly about this, but believes there are questions to be asked about Tower 7 or whatever the fuck.
Yeah, I mean, Jimmy Dore is very willing to embrace conspiracy theories.
But conspiracies, I believe in conspiracy. So, do you? If you okay, so
being a 9/11 truther in the past, it's funny. recently, he'll get super chats about this stuff, and he's even said he still talks about Seth Rich like there could be something there. So
oh my God. Still is 2019.
I think I may have on my YouTube channel, I have a playlist of like unlisted videos that are just sort of like orphan clips that didn't have a home in one of my. And I'm certain that I captured one from a live stream where he got a Seth Rich DM, I think, and put that in there. But so yeah, it's whether it's 9/11 or Hillary had Parkinson's. I mean, Rational Wiki actually the page on Jimmy Dore has like kind of like that's the place to me for all of the conspiracy stuff that he complete taxonomy of all.
Yes, if you're if you're feeling a little skittish about the name, Rational Wiki is like a website, or you've been to the website before and you feel like it's not that good. A lot of the pages there I feel like are hit or miss. I have seen the Jimmy Dore page at rationalwiki.org or .com, whatever it is, you can find it. Unless it's changed drastically since the last I saw it, I do strongly endorse it. It's a pretty good rundown of a lot of like the most crazy things Jimmy's ever said. But listen, like, a lot of people believe crazy stuff. So why does it matter that Jimmy believes in conspiracy theories? Kid show business. You got any thoughts on that?
Well, the reason why I spend so much time on this guy is that he has a growing channel. He was associated with the TYT brand, so he, in my mind, has a responsibility to be responsible to the source material. But because he's so reckless with facts and things like that, and take leaps of logic, it's and him he's now over 500,000 subscribers on YouTube.
That's right.
So it makes sense to kind of like this is a good target of criticism. I mean, it's 2019 and he's still talking about the DNC and Hillary Clinton and all of this stuff, and very rarely criticizes Trump for anything. And when he does, as I've said, he kind of gets reaps the whirlwind from his audience.
I do remember what I wanted to ask you though, which is, and whatever the answer is fine. We're not going to make a thing out of it. But do you listen to Chapo at all?
I've started. I mean, I don't listen to them. I'm actually a member of their podcast.
I mean, it's fine either way. They would joke about Hillary Clinton having 1,000 diseases, including Parkinson's or whatever, right? Like constantly, and nobody has said this to
cerebral
me yet.
palsy.
Yeah, nobody has said this to me yet, but I'm waiting for somebody to come up to me and make an equivalency between what they were saying on Chapo or other podcasts, or like dirtbag socialists on Twitter or whatever, like them, and Jimmy Dore. And I don't mean to sound like glib, but there's no other way for me to put it. The difference is one's a joke and one's not. Jimmy's not joking when he says, or at least if he is, like it's too straight for me to tell, because he's like looking straight into the camera, not smiling, like yelling about this, while his guests laugh nervously behind him. Right? Like I don't know if you have anything to say about that, but it always struck me as odd.
Yeah, I mean, I've only recently become aware of Chapo, and the couple videos I saw. I mean, I watched a video they did on Tulsi, and I watched one on Biden, and another one. And I'm like, I kind of agree with this. It sounds the analysis reminds me of. I mean, it's similar to what Sam Cedar, what he says about stuff. So I don't see Jimmy Dore and Chapo as being the same animal.
No, they aren't, and they definitely aren't in this instance. Like Chapo, for what, like all their faults or whatever, they at least understand that like doing a podcast and listening to a podcast is not really doing politics, right? Like they're having a little bit of an effect, spitting into the wind, I guess, but like doing politics is not that. It's canvassing or union organizing or 1,000 other things, but it ain't media consumption. Jimmy seems to believe that posting and media production and consumption is politics. That's what politics is. And the type of person that you listen to and tweet about, that tells the world what kind of politics you have, you know?
Yeah, I mean, he has referred to himself as a journalist and truth teller. I mean, he
Has he really called himself a journalist?
I could I'm pretty sure I could find a clip of him saying, I mean, that's
he probably has. That's just like the dumbest fucking shit. I'm sorry, man. I don't know why. Go on.
yeah, but I mean, he calls him. I mean, when you have to say I'm telling the truth all the time, which he's started doing lately, it's like, I mean, there's kind of I don't trust news sources that make one of their top things that they talk about is that you can trust no other news sources than this show.
Yeah, I mean, Fox does it a lot too.
It's fair and balanced. Don't trust the mainstream media. Lugenpresse, right?
I don't even think like CNN and MSNBC, they don't really do this. They don't fucking like throw a bunch of like explicit shade at each other that much. Now they may say like that other network and single out Fox, but they won't say don't trust anyone but CNN, whereas Fox will literally just basically tell you don't watch anything but Fox. Everyone else is lying.
Yeah, I mean, you don't see Chris Hayes showing like a Tucker Carlson clip and be like, "Can you believe this?" You don't trust Fox News.
It's not really about Jimmy so much as it's just like the spot Jimmy, or at least some people at the Young Turks network seem to think Jimmy fit. But it was largely believed by at least Jank and others there that Jimmy was filling a spot on the left of TYT, right? Because Jank, as meat-headed as he is sometimes about some things, I actually think he does sort of recognize that at the end of it all, he's actually pretty moderate. And he's happy to have that perspective on his show, but he does want people to his right and to his left, at least that he perceives as being to his right and to his left around his show. And I think he perceived Jimmy to be to his left. Now, we could argue all day about like, what can Jimmy's politics even really be when his brain is so addled that he can't seem to like hold the same mode of political philosophy for longer than a week or whatever, right? But regardless of all that, let's just put Jimmy on the left. Do you think the Young Turks are gonna hire anyone else or put anyone else in that slot who might actually fill that slot in an effective way and not just be a raving lunatic? Do you know what I mean?
Well, what I would say about that is I would imagine that if Jimmy were just coming up now, TYT would not, I don't think they would hire him as he is now. I think that when he was hired on, he was something else that was a little more acceptable. And then he just evolved into what he is. I don't think that Jank, this is just my pet theory, Jank seems to have wanted to have his cake and eat it too, in terms of having Jimmy on the roster, but not putting him on the main show. Because if you go back to 2016, he was like, on the power panel, like every other day, it seemed like. And then after the election, my pet theory is that they gave Jimmy aggressive progressives to kind of get him off of the show because aggressive progressives started in August of 2020. I think that Jank was basically like, okay, I can't have Jimmy, basically empowering the Trump administration. So let's just give him this smaller show that he can go his perspective. And so I think having Jimmy on the roster was, hey, we're not going to take a hit from losing members by getting rid of him. And we also kind of get to sort of exile him to this other show, because I think I actually did the count, and there was a point in 2017 where Jimmy had gone from like being a frequent main show guest to being just like 2 appearances.
Yes, there was a pretty drastic drop off. If I recall, it wasn't anything like he was there a bunch of weeks and then not at all. It was more like he was there a bunch of weeks, and then over the course of like a month, he was there like maybe once, and then the next month he was there like once, and then after that, the guy just vanished from the main show, right? And I watched some of those appearances too because I began to like sniff him out a little bit at least to try to see if I could catch him saying anything insane. And you know what? There's some of his worst fucking content. It's so boring. He's got nothing to say. Everyone else on the panel is just carrying him. All his jokes are stale and not landing. Like, it's actually pretty pathetic, if I'm being honest.
The very last time I saw Jimmy on the main show, he was on there for like the first hour. It may very well be the last time he was on there. It was a couple months ago, and he spent the entire time just staring down at his laptop and his phone and not really engaging with anybody was saying. He may have.
Do you think though that they're gonna slot anyone in to the left flank who's like actually worth a damn? And I don't even mean like, like as left as me or you or whoever. I just mean like maybe someone who's like to like not just a liberal social democrat and who isn't an insane person with conspiracy theories about everything. I don't know. Or do you think they're just gonna let aggressive progressives just die? Because that's basically what Jimmy was doing, right?
Yeah. Well, no, I think that Jimmy really, aggressive progressives really was kind of a rehash.
Well, he had two things, right? He had his own show, the Jimmy Dore show, and he had aggressive progressives, and he was touring. That's basically like all he's been doing. And so, my understanding is he's taking his channel with him, so he gets to keep his show or whatever. But the only thing TYT is really losing is like an aggressive progressive show or less.
I would be shocked if they. I mean, what I would imagine is going to happen to aggressive progressives is they'll continue it with like Steve, Malcolm, Ron, maybe Ron Placone, no, and nobody will watch it, and then it'll just sort of like guess.
I mean, step one, change that name. I've always hated it. It's terrible.
It's really corny.
I just a little off topic, but the logo for it where he's like screaming into the megaphone, but it's like blasting back in his face. I think Theo, shout out to my boy Theo, the Discord. He told me once he's convinced that somebody in like the TYT production department or whatever like made that for him as like a low key insult and then showed it to him and got him to say that he liked it.
Like he didn't get the joke.
Exactly, because he's Jimmy Dore and he's not very smart. And so that's the story of how that dumbass fucking picture of him shouting into his own ear with a megaphone, which, like, if you did that in real life, that would like destroy your ear. You would be deaf. It'd be terrible. I'm sorry.
Hey, check out this graphic I made as a joke. See? It's like, oh, that's great.
I fucking love it. Look how colorful it is.
Yeah, can you give me that? I want to put that on my Lava.
Yeah, Jimmy's like, I don't know if it's really what I'm after, and they're just like, oh, but Jimmy, like, check it out, like I drew you this like badass suit, it's like comic book style, it's cell shaded. And he's like, okay, fine.
That's probably true. I mean, it really does capture the essence of Jimmy Dore thing.
In any case, yeah, like they'll probably just like let that show die, which is really a shame because if I'm being honest, like this is good for TYT, it really is. But what would be better is if they had some actual socialists like prominently featured there. Near as I can tell, they have one. His name is Hassan. He does all his stuff for Facebook, which is fine. I'm not on Facebook. Facebook is lame. So I assume his content's doing great over there. But like as far as the main show and their other like prominent flagships, as near as I can tell, they have zero socialists or anything left of socialism.
You're right. They really don't have anybody like Jamie or Mike, because now when you look at who's Jimmy was never like that. Yeah, I mean, when you look at the people that are left, it's like, Anna, John,
and like a lot of them have their place, like because I don't want to turn this into a like shitting on TYT session, because like a lot of them, I like some hosts better than others, but almost all of them serve some role that I think is like useful, right? Now that Jimmy's gone, he didn't, so that's good. But like I said, they don't have as a real like left person. I'm sorry, continue.
Oh yeah, I mean, well, I like all of the main hosts on, to me, I mean, TYT is not really my bag because it's not, it's not as in depth as like Majority Report. So I really don't watch.
You're just into that harder shit.
Yeah, honestly, like hearing Sam talking about like Medicare policy and
Whoa! Hey, try to keep this podcast safe for work. Don't make my listeners too horny.
Okay, no problem.
Well, I feel like we've basically covered a pretty well amount. I don't know if you have anything in conclusion to really say about this guy. I maybe have a few words, but I'll give you the floor first if you want.
Well, I mean, it's kind of unfortunate because, like, Jimmy Dore is, he is a talented guy. I mean, he's a firebrand, and he has rage that does speak to people. And I really just kind of, I mean, nothing would make me happier if he would just channel that in the right way and do, embrace strategy that would actually help move, our Overton window to the left, instead of like, let's just let the fascists take, people will see how bad that is. And then, like in the end. So, if I would, nothing would make me happier if I had no reason to ever put out another video.
Well, I mean, now that he's not on the Young Turks network.
Well, I mean, he's still going to be doing his show, and he's going to be doing more of that. So, I mean, I'll have to see what happens, or what sort of his trajectory is after leaving the Young Turks, because my guess would be that he's gained a bit of cred with like that Dave, crowd, and maybe his audience is like the TYT. Look at how good that was for Dave Rubin. Kind of use that as, I think, being his platform. It's possible that, whatever influence Jimmy had in 2016, it's like now he's got 500,000 subscribers, and doesn't seem to be slow.
Yeah, it doesn't, and he's not going to crash and burn no matter how many times the world passes his bird brain ideas and predictions by, unfortunately. And I think that's something I've had to come to terms with over the past few years, and other people should too. The only other thing I really want to close with saying about Jimmy is this, because I hear this a lot, and I've heard it for years. What's wrong? Why don't you admire his passion and his fire? He doesn't always get everything right, but he really cares and feels. Jeff in Georgia, why can't you, come around to that? Why can't you accept that that's okay, and that he feels a role and a need for people through exercising that pathos, right? And I don't really know what to say to that, except if you think passion or zeal or fury, righteous or not, is good in and of itself, then I think you have a child's understanding of human interactions. I've actually had a lot of problems controlling myself and my temper throughout the years, and it's taken me a long time and a lot of work on myself to even approach something close to self-control in like a reasonable way. And that's bad. It's not good to act out of anger and to speak out of anger and fury and emotion all the time. Not because having emotions is bad or unjustified. Indeed, it's quite good. But if you've ever been in that state of mind and had to form your own thoughts during it, you get defensive about things that you have no business being defensive about. He gets prickly about things that he's wrong about because he was so, emotional in the argumenting of them, right? Like, just being passionate about something, like, isn't a virtue.
Hillary Clinton is a demon succubus, and Bloomberg detectives are coming to have their way with your wife.